Hi there, welcome to lesson number 10 in our Align and Design class. I guess it's called a class. And today we're talking about the subconscious mind and the brain. And I will say this is a subject that I have studied for about 2 years now. And a lot of it has been with when I discovered that our thoughts were electrical impulses. I think I connected the dots to like our ability to control those electrical impulses. And in the lesson today, we're going to be talking about positive and negative emotions and how you can plant ideas in your subconscious mind. So let's get started. Napoleon Hill opens his chapter with this paragraph, and let me read it because it is so hard to really articulate what he's saying without actually just reading it. So he says, the subconscious mind consists of a field of consciousness in which every impulse of thought that reaches the objective mind through any of the five senses is classified and recorded, and from which thoughts may be recalled or withdrawn as letters may be taken from a filing cabinet. And what I will suggest to you from my years of study, and I think this is one of the quotes that I heard years ago in Think and Grow Rich, is the analogy of a garden, and your subconscious mind is like a garden. If you plant things in the garden, they will grow and flourish and you will have abundance. But if you don't be intentional about what you put into your garden, weeds will grow. And this is where negative things come in unintentionally because you're not being intentional about what you put into your subconscious mind. So the subconscious, some people basically believe that it works kind of like behind the scenes. I have connected my subconscious, and maybe you have too, like I've connected it to my dreams. So you'll maybe have some experience during the day and that night it occurs in your dream. And like our subconscious works in the background of our mind day in and day out and while we're sleeping. And so it's such a big part of your development as a person and your growth as well. One of the things that I've studied and have worked on is being able to change patterns that were established in your first 10 years of life, because we don't realize that. I know, especially for me, I've had not some health issues, but as a baby, I had terrible eczema. I was allergic to my mother's breast milk, like things like that, where we would go to a doctor and they would say, oh, she's just, allergic to eggs, or they would find a way to label it and help us figure it out on more of like a conscious level or an objective level, as he calls here the objective mind. But what actually was probably happening is when my subconscious was first formed, I had some like detachment issues with my mother. And my body was physiologically rejecting her breast milk because of that subconscious trauma that had happened in the womb. I mean, I know that is like really kind of far-fetched, but if you start thinking about things like why, like I had an allergy develop when I was in maybe like 8 or 10 years old in my younger years, and that was also it was a food allergy to tree nuts. And people just think of that's an allergy to tree nuts, but you don't think of it actually is basically a program in the mind that needs to be rebooted somehow. And for me, like, I have kind of retrained my brain to not be allergic to nuts and to not be allergic to tree nuts. And it's kind of funny because I can eat pecans now and almonds, but there are still some nuts that give me trouble, like walnuts. But I believe that these are all things in our subconscious mind that are there for reasons other than it's an allergy. They might be there for like trauma, so to speak, and we may not have actually be like traumatized, like abused or beaten or like hurt in that way. But when you're, 1 week old, your trauma may have something to do with, your mother not wanting to breastfeed you. I mean, like, I know I'm getting like a little bit off topic, but I definitely have, gone into this quite a bit and find it very fascinating. Now, in the book, Napoleon Hill doesn't really talk about changing subconscious programming like I'm talking about with allergies and such, but he does talk about how you have control over what goes in now actively. And so that's what we should be doing. We should be consciously putting in the positive thoughts instead of unconsciously just letting the negative things grow in our subconscious garden. So I feel like that is a very important part of the subconscious. And he refers back to the chapter on autosuggestion and the way in which you can technically program your subconscious. So go back and have a look at the idea in autosuggestion of saying things with emotion. So that is one of the key points of being able to program your subconscious, is thinking of it and saying things with emotion. We talked last week about the sex energy and how magnetic people can be when they have a lot of sex energy. And so I'm going to list in the handout the 7 major positive emotions and the 7 major negative emotions. But just for an example, the emotion of sex is one of the positive emotions. Desire, faith, love, enthusiasm, romance, and hope. Those are all the positive, that he feels are the positive emotions that we can embody to help to program our subconscious mind. Some of the things that we inadvertently let into our subconscious are fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, and anger. So whether or not you're being intentional and planting positive things in your subconscious, or you're being unintentional and you're letting negative things plant in your subconscious, that's what grows in your life. I'm going to talk a little bit about prayer, just because he brings it up in his book, and because when I left religion, I'm no longer a religious person, so to speak. I'm using like one air quote here and one air quote here, but I'm no longer a religious person, but I am deeply spiritual. But one of the things I remember thinking in my transition, leaving like a organized religion, was that when people pray for God's will, or they just pray being open to God's will, that's like basically planting, having this whole garden that's planted and not knowing what you want to grow there. So it's like giving the control to God, because God knows better than you, and that God, I don't know, I don't want it to be like a hierarchy kind of thing, but it's really more like if you at least expressed your positive opinion, put those positive aspects into your prayer, then that would result the thing that you want. Whereas a lot of people from the religion that I came from basically like left it just an open slate. And in my opinion now, we need to offer up prayers, so to speak, with our positive intentions behind them. So, and he actually talks about this in the book. He says, you know, people pray only after everything else has failed. And at that point, their minds are filled with doubt and fear. And so those are the emotions that they're passing on to the subconscious. And so, so basically, if you add on to what I said of like praying for God's will is a blank slate, but praying in this place of already being in fear and doubt, you're putting that negativity into your prayer and into the ether, and having that low, heavy vibration that you don't want. So be intentional about it. I think there's some amazing studies going on right now with Dr. Joe Dispenza, where he has actually, you know, done a lot of studying on the subconscious mind and how to basically enact healings for people based on the science of the mind and the subconscious mind, or the brain and the subconscious mind. And he's actually not religious at all, so the connection isn't there, but he is a scientist and a psychologist, I believe. But he is working on literally taking groups of people to hospitals and positively impacting their psyche and helping to heal their physical body. So if you're interested in things like that, Dr. Joe Dispenza has a number of books, and I'm sure he's writing another one based on all of the live workshops that he does. Now, I want to talk about the brain a little bit. The chapter on the brain is chapter 13 in Think and Grow Rich, and he talks about the brain as being a broadcasting and receiving station. And it's basically a broadcasting station, like the subconscious mind is a sending station of the brain through which vibrations of thought are broadcast, and the creative imagination, which we've talked about for weeks now, is the receiving set. And that is how we pick up thoughts from the ether. One analogy that I heard recently about the different like levels of vibration, we talk about being at a high level of like emotional, energetic vibration, and a really good way to visualize that, because I do love a good word picture, I think, is that right? Is the keys on a piano. Now this comes from Paul Selig. He is an author and basically connects to his sixth sense to receive these books. And he talks about the different octaves on the piano and how when you are playing in a lower octave, it's a lower vibration. It's like the fear and the negativity is a low vibration. And what we are all trying to do is to play at a higher vibration, higher frequency, higher octave. And that's just helpful to me to actually see it like visually on the piano. We want to play at the highest octave. I guess it would be the high notes are on the right side. So the higher octave, We're playing at a higher vibration. We're listening and hearing and receiving. Like, we're listening and we're broadcasting at that higher frequency and that higher octave. And that is where all of your dreams are being made a reality. They're not at the lower octave. They're not at the lower frequency of fear and doubt and uncertainty. They are at a higher octave of confidence and love and joy. And so I love that analogy that Paul Selig uses of the octaves. And he says that the collective consciousness is learning to hear and receive and broadcast at that higher octave, which I thought was a really cool connection. So that's really the meat of this lesson in the book. It's probably interesting to note that this was written in 1939, and Napoleon Hill talks about studies that were done on telepathy and clairvoyance and basically like psychic type abilities. And so he went there, and it's an interesting read. If you don't have the book, I know you can listen for free on YouTube. It's the chapter on the brain. And given all the information that we've kind of covered so far, it will make sense. We're talking about people connecting with their creative imagination to infinite intelligence. And so that is basically what Napoleon Hill thinks of as telepathy and as these psychic abilities. And anything that I have read or heard points, everything that I have heard on psychic abilities really points to the fact that practicing them will hone them and even create them in yourself if you are interested. And I know I had a game on my phone that was, I can't remember what it was called. I think Jess Lively told me about it in an episode probably about a year ago. But it's just a simple game of colored squares, and you use like your intuitive vision to pick which square has, you know, like the coin underneath it or whatever. And it is a tool that you can use to train your like psychic abilities. So I don't know. It's just things that I find fun occasionally to do, but you know, it also helps me to develop my own intuition and my gut feeling. So like on a more practical level, it helps me to be a better mom because I know what happened. You know, when my son tells me something that I don't really think is the truth, like I know, and I trust my instinct and my gut, and I call him out on it, and I'm right. And that feels great. So if that's interesting to you, I will find the link and post it in our conscious practices for this week. So keep doing what you're doing. I hope you're enjoying the lessons. And just, again, this topic on the subconscious mind and the brain just open you up to new things. And you don't have to totally subscribe to all the thoughts that I shared today, but hopefully it will make you maybe curious, and you might go looking at that, you know, allergy that you have, or you might consciously think about the thoughts that you're having, even if they're not goal related or business related. You might consider, what are you putting in your subconscious mind? What are you planting? Good things that will, you know, that you want in your mind? Or are you open to negativity and just letting the weeds grow up? Like, you know, be more intentional about what you're putting in your subconscious mind and realize that you can control it. So thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.